Hello everyone, welcome, my name is Phoenix and this is the Consumer's Guide to Video Games. Doom: The Dark Ages, 2025, id Software. Doom: The Dark Ages is a first-person shooter. Taking place long before the events of Doom and Doom Eternal, the player once again takes control of the mighty Doomslayer. When Argent Dunur comes under attack by the forces of Hell, who are under the command of Prince Ozrock, the Doomslayer is sent into battle to aid King Novik and the forces of Argent Dunur. However, the Makers control Doomslayer's every move, a prospect that doesn't sit well with our favorite demon killer. Eventually breaking loose of his leash, the Doomslayer must carve a bloody path through Maker and Demon alike in order to stop Prince Ozrock's invasion. Okay, so this is a very complicated case of a game. I think we just need to get right into the nitty-gritty here to really make sense of what is going on with this game. What players are going to notice immediately is that this is not the same game as Doom Eternal. id Software decided to reinvent what these new Doom games are all about. Taking place in what is more or less the Middle Ages, Doomslayer's arsenal and mechanics are drastically altered. While you move just as fast as in previous games, you do not fight as fast. Having been given a shield, slaying enemies is a much slower paced affair. Instead of shooting everything in sight and that being fine, you have to block and parry projectiles and melee attacks, all while riddling enemies with bullets and smashing them with whatever melee instrument you choose. You are forced to time your attacks, often entering into one-on-one combat with enemies during these skirmishes. Along with that, Doomslayer's arsenal has gotten a major overhaul. Sticking with the Middle Ages gimmick somewhat, you still get your trusty shotgun and plasma rifles and rocket launchers and whatnot. The BFG is back as well, but now it's a giant ballista that shoots arrows. Along with that, you get a gun that shoots ground-up skulls, a gun that shoots a ball on a chain, a flail, a mace, etc., etc. But one of the biggest changes and additions come in the form of vehicle missions. Doomslayer now has a dragon he can fly around on in certain missions, having to shoot up giant airships and chase down fighter pilots. Along with that, you also get to pilot a giant mech suit, getting into big fistfights with towering demons. Doom: The Dark Ages has changed so much about the Doom formula for this entry, but are these changes welcome? To me, I just didn't gel with the new way of doing things. Sure, the dragon and the mech are fun when you use them, but it's the normal Doom-style combat that bothers me. This is because I found much of it to be incongruous and contradictory. The base combat of shooting up enemies and parrying projectiles can at times be fun when you begin to understand the new mechanics and get a bunch of upgrades going, but sticking to that old school mentality of sending hordes of enemies at you just doesn't work with these new mechanics. Having to fight a giant enemy one-on-one, parrying and blocking his attacks, all while other enemies are raining energy balls at you is absolutely annoying. Like, we're doing too many things at once, and it becomes a chore to get through. This is bizarre because when you fight bosses with his combat system, it's really, really fun. The final boss fights against Ozrock and the Creammaker are really great examples of this. If the game had focused more on this and orchestrated the combat encounters more around one-on-one fights, and maybe throwing in some fodder enemies to give you health and armor and whatnot, I would be more in love with this game. The level design in this game sort of builds on what Doom Eternal was trying to do. In some ways it succeeds at that. The maps are sprawling, chock full of secrets, and the puzzles you encounter make great use of your new abilities. Having to throw around your shield at targets, platform and swimming, you'll be doing lots in these levels to find upgrades and secrets. However, at times I think the boys at id went a little overboard, and the levels got too big for their own good. Like, I ain't kidding, some of these levels are big. And I just felt a lack of compulsion to explore all of them to get everything, especially since there were considerable swaths of a level that felt like vacant and empty. It was nowhere near as tight as those previous two games. Another thing that kind of bugged me about the game was the writing. This isn't because the writing was objectively bad or anything. It was fine, but that's the problem. It's just fine. The Doomslayer's killing Satan or something. Fucking neat. Rick Cosnett was fine as Prince Ozrock. He got a decent enough presence, but I wasn't enamored with it. I didn't care about the royal family in Argent Denur either. They were just sort of there. I suppose, though, we did get some insight into the whole pact between heaven and hell thing, but it was more cool when it was presented in Doom Eternal. I will say that the Creedmaker was kind of funny. He's a fat middle manager sort of character, and Darren DePaul did a good job capturing the sniveling twit's cowardice really well. But as a whole, nothing about this story wowed me in any way. It was a typical sort of action story, and it did its job more or less by keeping the game moving. Whatever. The one thing I think I can unequivocally praise is the art design. Using the new id Tech 8 engine, Doom the Dark Ages looked absolutely gorgeous on my PS5. The textures of the models and environments and their realism and sleekness were a massive step up from Doom Eternal. Not to mention, the character design was cool. Doomslayer got a new look with a fancy cape and a shield. Sufficiently edgy, I must say. The before-mentioned Creedmaker was this blob of an angel, and in tandem with that voice performance, that was very fun. But the enemies were the ones that got massive makeovers. Fitting the medieval times gimmick, the Pinky is now a giant steed with a demon riding him. The Revenant is a cloaked sorcerer that can turn transparent. The Battle Knight / Hell Knight now wields a giant axe and it looks like a demonic barbarian. Cacodemons are giant brains, and the Barons are now weird eldritch beasts with axe hands. There are new enemies now, which include a giant demonic knight with a shield and trident, a giant lizard with a spear. All sorts of fantasy nonsense abounds in this game. It's all really, really cool. The music in this game is interesting because while it does hit you with those pommeling gent riffs that these games have become known for, there are also compositions that delve into normal heavy metal and thrash metal. More full-sounding power chords and higher tunings are prevalent in these riffs, and hearing something like that felt more apt in a medieval sort of setting. The atmospheric stuff ranges from those droning guitar shots to sharp string pieces to deep choir vocals. I respect the fuck out of this score for varying its sound so much compared to the other two games. Not that the other two games had bad scores, fucking Mick Gordon was fucking cooking on those. But this score was really serving the tone and setting for Doom the Dark Ages. The menu music is a great example of this, with its sharp string chords over top a dirge-like palette of electronics and guitar noises. In general, I respect the fuck out of the team at id for not resting on their laurels, I suppose. They could have just cranked out 5 more Doom Eternals and we'd be eating them up. Doom the Dark Ages marked an attempt at something different. I think the game looks beautiful, has heavy music, and at its best hits you with that fun and exhilarating Doom combat, but all of it with a medieval twist. I just don't think id quite nailed down the gameplay as much as they should have, resulting in an experience that can be frustrating and full of conflicting ideas. If you like Doom, I definitely think you should at least check it out for yourself. It may appeal to you more than it did me, but I still like me some Doom, and I got what I paid for in the end, I guess. And I am feeling a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10 on this one. I think it's a little closer to a 7.5 than it is an 8. It's just a bunch about this game just doesn't quite gel for me. Catch you later, guys.